My wife refused to pay for my mother's funeral, never knowing I owned the company. My money is not going into the ground with your mother. Claire said it without raising her voice. That was what made it worse. She stood at the marble island in our kitchen, one hand resting beside a half-finished glass of white wine, the other scrolling through something on her phone as if we were discussing an overdue electric bill instead of my mother's funeral. Rain struck the windows behind her. On the table between us sat a cream-colored folder from Rosewood Memorial Home. Inside was the estimate, casket, burial plot, flowers, transportation, a simple service at the little church my mother had attended for 26 years. Nothing extravagant, nothing she would have wanted people going into debt for. $23,000. I had already arranged most of it. I only asked Claire to help cover the remaining $8,000 from our joint emergency account, because the funeral home required payment by noon the next day. Claire finally looked up. Her eyes moved from the folder to my face. You have siblings. My sister is a public school teacher with 2 children. Then sell something. I stared at her. My mother died 2 days ago, and that somehow makes financial irresponsibility noble. The words landed softly, almost elegantly. Claire had always known how to make cruelty sound reasonable. I looked at the woman I had been married to for 7 years. Perfect ivory blouse, diamond earrings, hair swept behind one shoulder. Not one visible trace of grief for the woman who had cooked her favorite cinnamon rolls every Christmas morning and defended her every time relatives called Claire cold. She loved you, I said. Claire sighed. Daniel, please don't do that. Do what? Turn this into some emotional loyalty test. The refrigerator hummed in the silence. Outside, headlights moved through the wet street. I heard my mother's voice in my head from years earlier. Never beg anyone to prove they care about you, Danny. Watch what they do when caring costs them something. At the time, I had thought she was talking about business. I understood now. Claire pushed the funeral estimate toward me with 2 fingers. I'm not paying for it. I didn't argue. That surprised her. She had expected anger. Maybe pleading. Maybe the version of me she had grown used to. The quiet husband with ordinary shirts, an older sedan, and a vague job in operations that she described to her friends with the embarrassed smile people used when admitting their spouse had never quite fulfilled his potential. Instead, I closed the folder. Okay. Claire blinked. That's it. That's it. I picked up my coat. Where are you going? To bury my mother. I left before she could answer. What Claire did not know was that money had never been the problem. It hadn't been the problem for a very long time. And by refusing to help bury the woman who raised me, Claire was about to discover that almost everything she believed about her husband was wrong. My mother, Evelyn Mercer, had never cared whether I became rich. She cared whether I became decent. There was a difference. She raised my sister Emily and me in a narrow brick house outside Columbus after my father disappeared when I was 11. He did not die. That would have been easier to explain. He simply decided one family had become inconvenient. For years, my mother worked mornings in a bakery and nights doing medical billing from the dining room table. I remember waking up at 2 in the morning and seeing her asleep beside stacks of insurance forms, her cheek pressed against her forearm, the blue glow of an ancient desktop monitor lighting the room. She never complained, not where we could hear her. When I got my first scholarship to Ohio State, she cried in the parking lot. When I started my first company at 27, she was the first person to invest $5,000. Her entire savings account. I tried to refuse it. She handed me the check anyway. If you fail, she said, you'll learn something $5,000 could never buy me. I laughed. And if I succeed, then buy me lunch. That was my mother. No speeches about mansions. No demands for repayment. No fantasies about yachts. Just lunch. The company was called North Star Logistics Technologies. At first, it was 4 people in a rented warehouse office with bad heating and 1 coffee machine that sounded like it was dying every time someone pressed the button. We built software that helped regional freight companies reduce empty-mile trucking. It was not glamorous. It was not the sort of startup people posted about beside rooftop pools. But it worked. Then it worked better. Then it worked well enough that 1 trucking network adopted it. Then 7. Then 34. Within 6 years, North Star was quietly processing routes for a significant portion of commercial freight across the Midwest. Investors came. Then private equity firms. Then global contracts. The company became worth more money than I had ever imagined seeing attached to my name. but almost no one outside the industry knew I founded it. That was intentional. Our chief commercial officer handled interviews. Our president appeared at conferences. I hated cameras. I hated profiles. I hated people changing around me when they learned a number. My mother understood. Claire did not. When we met, North Star was already growing quickly, but I introduced myself simply as Daniel Mercer, operations consultant. That wasn't exactly a lie. I still spent most of my time solving operational problems. I drove an old Volvo because it worked. I wore inexpensive watches because I lost them. I lived in a modest townhouse because I spent 16-hour days at the office and saw no reason to buy 12 rooms I would never enter. Claire liked that at first. She said I seemed grounded, different from the men she met in corporate finance. She told me on our third date that ambition without humility was insecurity wearing a suit. I remember thinking my mother would like her. For a while, she did. So did I. Claire was funny then. Sharp. Driven. She could turn a grocery trip into an adventure and laugh so hard she had to lean against the cart. We married 14 months later. I never hid that I had investments. I never hid that I had business interests. But I did hide the scale. Not because I wanted to test her. I hated those stories where rich people disguise themselves to see who loved them. Love should not be an exam with a secret answer key. I kept North Star private because I wanted one part of my life where my name did not arrive before I did. And for years, it worked. Then Claire began climbing. First senior analyst, then director, then vice president of strategic procurement at Halcyon Automotive Group. With every promotion, something small changed. The restaurants became more expensive. The vacations became more performative. She started comparing our house to her colleague Brandon's house, my car to a managing director's Porsche, my clothes to the tailored suits worn by men she met at industry dinners. At first, the comments were jokes. You know, husbands are allowed to own jackets that fit. Then suggestions. Maybe you should look for something with more upward mobility. Then criticism. You're almost 40, Daniel. At some point, being content just means lacking ambition. The strangest part was that I was working more than ever. North Star had expanded into predictive infrastructure modeling. We had acquired 2 smaller firms. Our annual revenue had crossed 9 figures. I would sit across from Claire at dinner after signing a $40 million technology partnership that morning, and she would ask whether I had considered taking a management course so I could finally move up. I could have told her. Many times, I almost did. Then I would watch the way she treated a waiter, or hear her dismiss someone based on their job title, or see her light up when a senior executive entered a room and cool when an assistant spoke. And each time, I waited. Not because I wanted revenge later. Because I was afraid of what the truth would reveal now. My mother noticed the change before I admitted it. One Sunday afternoon, we sat on her porch drinking coffee while Claire was away at a luxury wellness weekend with coworkers. Mom rubbed one thumb over a crack in her mug. Are you happy? Yes. She gave me the look mothers reserve for adult sons who still think they can lie. Are you respected? That question hurt more. I looked toward the maple tree in her yard. She's under pressure. So were you when you slept under your desk. She's ambitious. So are you. She doesn't know everything. Mom went quiet. Then she said, money doesn't create character, Danny. It rents a bigger room for it. I smiled. That sounds like something you read on a greeting card. I'm old. We invented greeting cards. She reached over and covered my hand. If you tell her because she is your wife. Not because you need her to regret something. I promised. I never got the chance. 3 months later, my mother collapsed in the bakery aisle of a supermarket. A cerebral aneurysm. No warning. No long illness. No time to prepare. By the time I reached the hospital, Emily was sitting against a hallway wall with both hands over her face. My mother was gone. Claire arrived 4 hours later. She hugged me for 12 seconds. I remember because I counted. Not intentionally. Grief does strange things to time. She told me she had an important presentation the next morning and asked whether I minded if she went home. I said no. I slept in a hospital chair until sunrise. The next day, I met with the funeral director. My mother had left instructions in a battered green envelope. No expensive coffin. No dramatic flowers. No sad slideshow where everyone pretends I never had a bad haircut. Her handwriting. Even in death, she was making us laugh. She wanted burial beside her parents. Church service. Coffee afterward. And one request underlined twice. Do not fight about money because of me. I almost smiled when I read it. Then came the estimate. I could have paid the entire amount from one personal account without noticing the balance change. But the funeral was a family responsibility, and I wanted Claire beside me in it. Not financially, emotionally. The $8,000 was symbolic. It came from the joint emergency account we had both contributed to for years. I thought there could be no clearer emergency. Claire disagreed. 2 hours after leaving our kitchen, I sat alone in my mother's empty house. The air still smelled faintly of vanilla and laundry detergent. Her slippers were beside the sofa. A crossword puzzle remained open on the coffee table, 3 clues unfinished. I paid the funeral home in full. Then I sat in the dark. I did not feel angry yet. Anger would have been easier. What I felt was the slow collapse of an explanation I had spent years building for someone I loved. Claire wasn't stressed. She wasn't temporarily distracted. She wasn't simply ambitious. She had become someone who believed kindness was a transaction. And my mother had warned me without ever asking me to leave. The funeral was held on Saturday. Cold sunlight passed through the stained glass windows of Grace Methodist Church. My mother's casket rested beneath white lilies. Emily sat beside me, trembling whenever someone mentioned Mom's laugh. Former co-workers came. Neighbors came. The pharmacist who had known her for 15 years came. 3 women from the bakery brought enough food to feed 70 people. Claire arrived 9 minutes before the service began. Black designer dress, dark sunglasses, phone in hand. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "I have to leave by 2. Halcyon's hosting the Meridian executives tonight." I looked at her. Tonight. It's important. My mother's funeral ended at 1:30. Claire left at 1:43. She did not come to the cemetery. I watched her Mercedes disappear past the church while 6 men carried my mother toward the hearse. That was the moment something inside me became still. Not broken. Still. At the cemetery, after everyone left, I remained beside the fresh earth. Emily squeezed my shoulder. "You coming?" "In a minute." When I was alone, I looked down at the flowers. "I should have listened," I whispered. Wind moved through the bare trees. Of course, my mother did not answer. But I remembered the answer anyway. Do not make permanent decisions from temporary pain. So I made no decision that day. I waited. 3 weeks later, Claire made one for me. She came home after midnight from another corporate dinner and placed her purse on the kitchen counter. "Daniel, we need to talk." There are sentences whose meaning arrives before the words that follow. I closed my laptop. Claire sat across from me. "I don't think we want the same life." "What life do you want?" She exhaled. "Growth." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "Go on. I'm moving into a new phase professionally. I'm meeting people who think bigger, build bigger, risk more. And me? You're comfortable." She said the word like a diagnosis. "You've been doing the same thing for years." I looked at the laptop in front of me. That morning, Northstar's board had approved the acquisition of a European logistics platform for $620 million. Have I? Yes. She leaned forward. "I know this sounds cruel, but sometimes love isn't enough when one person outgrows the other." There it was. The clean corporate phrasing for contempt. "I see." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Again, my calm bothered her. "I don't want this to become ugly." "It won't. I've spoken to an attorney." "Okay." She hesitated. "There's someone else." That finally hurt. Not as much as my mother's funeral, but enough. "Who?" Claire looked toward the window. "Mark Ellison." I knew the name. Executive Vice President at Halcyon. Married until recently. Expensive reputation. The kind of man who filled rooms with stories about himself. "He understands my world," Claire said. I nodded slowly. "And he can give you the life you think I can't." Claire said nothing. That was answer enough. I signed the divorce agreement 6 weeks later. I did not contest the house. I did not contest the furniture. I did not reveal Northstar. The company's shares had been placed into trusts and holding structures years before our marriage on legal advice, so there was no hidden marital asset issue to resolve. Claire assumed my financial disclosures reflected the modest consulting income one drew personally. That income was real. It was simply not my wealth. She took the Mercedes. I kept the Volvo. At the courthouse, she removed her ring and set it on the table beside the documents. "I hope someday you find something that makes you want more from life," she said. I looked at the ring, then at her. I think I just did. She mistook the meaning. Most people would have. After the divorce, I did not chase her. I did not ask mutual friends about Mark. I did not search social media at midnight. I went back to work. Grief and heartbreak have one thing in common. They leave enormous empty spaces in the day. You either fill those spaces deliberately or they fill themselves with ghosts. I filled mine with North Star. We expanded. Not recklessly. Carefully. We entered port logistics, rail prediction, emergency medical supply routing. When severe winter storms shut down interstate corridors, our systems redirected food and medicine across 5 states. Government agencies noticed. Then national retailers. Then manufacturers. 2 years after my divorce, North Star acquired a data company in Boston. The year after that, we opened offices in London and Singapore. Business journals began asking for interviews. I refused most. My chief communications officer, Maya Chun, once dropped a magazine on my desk. The headline read, "Who is the invisible owner behind North Star?" "You realize being mysterious is making them more interested," she said. "I'm not mysterious. I'm busy. You own a multi-billion-dollar company and still eat yogurt over the sink. That is efficiency." She shook her head. My mother would have liked Maya. Maya had joined North Star when we had 19 employees and stayed through everything. She was one of the few people who knew about Claire. She never insulted her. That mattered. One evening after a board meeting, Maya found me staring at the old $5,000 check my mother had written me. I kept it framed in my office. "You okay?" she asked. "It's been 3 years today." She knew immediately. "Your mom." I nodded. Then Maya placed a folder on my desk. "This may be a bad time." "What is it?" "Halcyon Automotive." I looked up. They approached us. Halcyon had been struggling. Their procurement systems were outdated. Supplier delays had cost them hundreds of millions. Their stock had fallen sharply after 2 failed product launches. North Star's board saw opportunity. Not revenge. Opportunity. Halcyon controlled manufacturing capacity we wanted. We controlled technology they desperately needed. Maya continued. "They're open to a strategic rescue package. Possibly majority acquisition." I opened the folder. The first page listed senior leadership. Mark Ellison, Chief Operating Officer. Claire Ellison, Senior Vice President, Strategic Partnerships. I stared at the surname. Maya noticed. They married last year. I felt something. Not pain exactly. More like hearing an old song from another room. "Does the board know?" "Know what?" "That she's my ex-wife." "No, keep it that way." Maya studied me. "Do you want us to walk?" "No, Daniel. The deal either makes sense or it doesn't. My history doesn't get a vote." She smiled faintly. "Your mother trained you annoyingly well." I closed the folder. She did. For 4 months, North Star conducted due diligence. Claire never knew. Neither did Mark. Our acquisition team operated through a subsidiary called Meridian Industrial Partners. The irony was not lost on me. Meridian was the same investor group Claire had been trying to impress the night of my mother's funeral. What she had not known then was that North Star owned Meridian. Piece by piece, our investigators uncovered the depth of Halcyon's problems. Inflated supplier contracts, poor internal controls, executive bonuses tied to misleading efficiency reports. Nothing criminal at first glance, but reckless. And Mark's division was at the center of much of it. Claire's name appeared repeatedly in procurement approvals. I never interfered. If she had done nothing wrong, the facts would protect her. If she had, my feelings should not protect her either. Then came the email. Maya entered my office one morning without knocking. "You need to see this." She placed a printed chain of messages on my desk. Claire had approved a series of vendor renewals against internal audit recommendations. Why? Because one of the vendors was controlled by a longtime associate of Mark. The contracts were overpriced by nearly 18%. Not enough evidence of fraud. Enough evidence of catastrophic judgment. At the bottom of one email, Claire had written, "Once Meridian takes control, no one will care how we got through the quarter as long as the numbers look stable." I read it twice. Maya watched me. "You want to recuse yourself from the acquisition vote?" "No, you're sure?" "Yes." I placed the document down. "But send everything to outside counsel. Independent review." She nodded. "No revenge. No favors. Just light. People reveal themselves when they believe no one important is watching." Claire had taught me that. The acquisition was announced on a Thursday. Halcyon employees received an internal email at 8 a.m. Meridian Industrial Partners, TO, complete majority acquisition with North Star Technologies. The market reacted immediately. By noon, Claire had called Maya's office twice, trying to learn the identity of North Star's controlling owner. She was told the founder would attend the formal shareholder and leadership meeting the following week. I later learned Mark had spent that entire weekend telling executives he expected to be named president of the combined automotive division. Claire believed the acquisition would elevate them. She had no idea it had already exposed them. The meeting took place at the Whitmore Grand Hotel. The ballroom held more than 400 people. Halcyon directors, senior executives, investors, press, Northstar leadership. Claire arrived in a silver-gray suit beside Mark. I watched from a private preparation room upstairs on a monitor. She looked almost exactly as I remembered her at corporate events. Composed, polished, certain she belonged near power. Mark shook hands aggressively and laughed too loudly. Maya stood beside me. You don't have to do the reveal theatrically. I'm not. You're walking into a ballroom where your ex-wife thinks you're an unsuccessful operations consultant before being introduced as the man who owns the company acquiring hers. I adjusted my cuff. That does sound theatrical when you say it that way. Maya smiled. You nervous? No, that surprised me. Years ago, I had imagined Claire discovering the truth. In those fantasies, I always pictured satisfaction. Her face falling. Her regret. My triumph. But standing there, I felt none of it. Only sadness. Not for myself. For how much of life people waste measuring the wrong things. At 7:14 p.m., I entered the ballroom through the side corridor. No announcement. No spotlight. Just me. Dark suit. No tie. The same old watch I had worn the week my mother died. Claire saw me almost immediately. Her expression changed from surprise to confusion, then amusement. She excused herself from a group and walked toward me. Daniel. Claire. She looked me up and down. What are you doing here? Attending the meeting. She laughed softly. Of course. Meridian probably brought in outside operations consultants. I said nothing. Mark approached behind her. Claire touched his arm. Mark, you remember Daniel. We had never met. But Mark smiled as if he had. Right? The ex-husband. He shook my hand. His grip was unnecessarily firm. Good to finally meet you. You too. Claire lowered her voice. This is a senior leadership event, Daniel. I know. I'm only telling you because security is strict tonight. How thoughtful. She frowned. Mark smirked. Then he noticed several Northstar board members watching us from across the room. One of them, Thomas Reed, raised his glass toward me in greeting. Mark followed the gesture. You know Reed? Yes. How? We work together. Claire's expression shifted slightly. Before she could ask more, the lights dimmed. A bell sounded from the stage. Guests moved toward their tables. Mark touched Claire's back. Come on. I want us close to the front when they announce the restructuring. Claire looked at me once more, almost pitying. I hope this turns into something good for you. I met her eyes. So do I. She walked away. The program began. Halcyon's chairman spoke first. Then Meridian's managing director. Charts appeared. Market forecasts. Integration targets. Capital commitments. Finally, Thomas Reed took the stage. Before we discuss leadership structure, he said, there is someone I would like to recognize. The room quieted. Northstar has sometimes been described as a company without a face. A few people laughed. Our founder prefers engineering rooms to television studios and working sessions to magazine covers. But none of what we are announcing tonight exists without his vision. Claire stopped moving. I saw it from 30 feet away. Not recognition yet. Something closer to instinct. Thomas continued. 15 years ago, he began with 4 employees in a rented warehouse office. Today, Northstar and its affiliated companies operate across 23 countries. Mark leaned toward Claire and whispered something. She did not respond. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Northstar. Technology's founder, chairman, and controlling owner, Daniel Mercer. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the ballroom rose. Applause rolled across the room. I walked toward the stage. Claire's face lost all color. Her hand remained frozen around the stem of her glass. Mark stared at me, then at her, then back at me. I passed their table. Claire whispered my name. Daniel, I did not stop. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because 400 people were waiting. On stage, Thomas shook my hand and stepped aside. I stood behind the podium. Lights warmed my face. Beyond them, the room blurred. Then I found Claire. She looked as if the laws of physics had changed without warning. I thought I would enjoy that. I didn't. I began. When people discuss acquisitions, they tend to use words like assets, scale, leverage, efficiencies. A few nods. But companies are people before they are numbers. The room became still. My mother taught me that. My voice nearly caught. I paused. She invested the first $5,000 in North Star. Behind me, a photograph appeared on the screen. My mother, standing beside our original warehouse office, holding a paper coffee cup, smiling. I had not known Maya included it. For years, I thought the most important thing she gave me was faith in an idea. I was wrong. The most important thing she gave me was a standard. Claire lowered her eyes. A company should not ask only whether something is profitable. It should ask whether it is worthy, whether the people inside it are treated with dignity, whether leadership accepts responsibility when no one is watching. Mark shifted in his chair. I did not look at him. North Star did not acquire Halcyon to destroy it. We invested because thousands of employees built something worth saving. Then I gave the operational plan. Factories would remain open. Frontline jobs would be protected where possible. Supplier relationships would be reviewed. Executive compensation would be frozen. Independent audits would begin immediately. No dramatic accusations. No public humiliation. Just consequences. When I finished, the room stood again. Claire did not. Afterward, while guests moved toward the reception area, Maya approached me. Outside counsel completed the preliminary review. And Mark is being placed on administrative leave tonight. I nodded. Claire. She ignored controls. But so far, no evidence she personally benefited. So, recommendation is suspension pending review. Not termination yet. Follow it. Maya searched my face. You don't want to be in the room? No, that answer mattered to me. 3 years earlier, part of me might have wanted to watch. Now I wanted coffee. I had almost reached the private elevator when Claire found me. Daniel. I stopped. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in dark blue, far from the ballroom. She approached slowly. Up close, her composure was gone. Her eyes were wet. You own North Star? Yes. How long? Since the beginning. She stared. When we were married? Yes. When you were driving that old Volvo? Yes. When I kept telling you to find a better job? Yes. Her hand covered her mouth for a second. Why didn't you tell me? I considered the question. I was going to. Before my mother died. She flinched. The silence that followed was different from all our other silences. There was nowhere for either of us to hide. Claire looked toward the floor. The funeral. I said nothing. She began to cry. Not loudly. That would have been easier to dismiss. I didn't know. Know what? That you had money. The instant she said it, she understood. Her face changed. I almost felt sorry for her. That was never the point, I said. I know. No, Claire. I don't think you did. She wiped her cheek. I was angry. I was under so much pressure. Mark kept telling me we had to stop carrying people who weren't contributing to the life we wanted. My mother was dead. I know. She had fed you, defended you, loved you. I know. And you thought helping bury her depended on whether I was successful enough. Claire closed her eyes. I'm ashamed. For the first time since the divorce, I believed her. But shame does not rebuild what contempt destroys. She whispered, was all of this because of me? The acquisition? She nodded. No, please don't lie. I'm not. Halcyon made business sense. And the investigation? Your decisions triggered the investigation. She looked frightened. Are you going to fire me? That decision is being handled independently. You could stop it. Yes. Will you? No, her eyes widened. Because you hate me? No, that seemed to hurt her more. Then why? Because if I interfere to punish you, I become vindictive. If I interfere to save you, I become corrupt. You wanted to be judged in the world of serious people, Claire. I looked through the glass doors toward the ballroom. This is what serious accountability looks like. She breathed shakily. Mark told me you were holding me back. I almost smiled. Mark didn't make you refuse to help bury my mother. No, he didn't make you look down on my work. No, he didn't make you leave. Her voice broke. No, that matters. Claire folded her arms tightly across herself. I thought you had no future. I shook my head. You didn't leave because I had no future. She looked at me. You left because you couldn't respect a future you couldn't see. Tears slipped down her face. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question I knew would come. Did you ever love me? Yes. Do you still? I thought about the woman in the grocery store laughing over frozen pizza. The woman dancing barefoot in our first apartment. The woman who sat beside me during my mother's birthday dinner and helped wash every dish. Then I thought about the marble kitchen island. My mother's funeral estimate. My wife's voice. My money is not going into the ground with your mother. I care what happens to you, I said. That's not what I asked. It's the answer I have. She began crying harder. I did not hold her. That would have been cruel in another way. Instead, I took a handkerchief from my pocket and offered it. She stared at it before taking it. You always carried these, she whispered. My mother said tissues disintegrate when life gets serious. Claire laughed once through the tears. Then the laugh collapsed. I wish I could apologize to her. I looked away. So do I. That was the first truly unforgivable consequence. Not that my mother died believing Claire was cruel. Mom had never hated her. She died still hoping we would find our way back to kindness. Claire would never get to stand in front of her and say, I was wrong. Some doors close without drama. That makes them no less permanent. The investigation lasted 9 weeks. Mark was terminated for undisclosed conflicts of interest and violations of procurement policy. Claire received a formal sanction and was removed from strategic procurement. She was offered a lower-ranking role in a different division. She accepted. I later learned that she and Mark separated 2 months after the acquisition. I did not celebrate. I did not ask why. North Star moved forward. Halcyon recovered slowly. Thousands of employees kept their jobs. Supplier costs fell. Factory output stabilized. For the first time in years, the company posted an operating profit. Claire and I did not speak for almost a year. Then, on the anniversary of my mother's death, I found an envelope at the reception desk of North Star headquarters. No return address. Inside was a check for $23,000 made out to the Evelyn Mercer Community Foundation. We had created the foundation 6 months earlier to support funeral expenses for families who could not afford to bury a loved one. With the check was a note in Claire's handwriting. It read, I know money cannot repair what I failed to give when it mattered. Please use this so someone else never has to choose between grief and dignity. No signature. None was needed. I stood in the lobby holding the note while employees walked around me. For a long time, I did nothing. Then I went upstairs to my office. My mother's original $5,000 check still hung on the wall. Beside it was the photograph Maya had used at the acquisition event. Mom in her cheap winter coat. Paper coffee cup. Proud smile. I placed Claire's note in the bottom drawer. Not beside my mother's check. Some things deserve remembrance. Others simply deserve release. That spring, the foundation paid for 41 funerals. I attended none of them. They were not my grief to enter. But every family received the same card. No logo. No company name. Only one sentence from Evelyn Mercer. When someone is hurting, don't ask what kindness will cost you. Ask what refusing it might cost them. Years passed. North Star grew. I finally replaced the Volvo after the transmission died at 312,000 miles. Maya threw a mock funeral for it in the employee parking lot. Someone brought flowers. Someone else made a cardboard tombstone. I laughed harder than I had in years. Later that evening, I drove my new car to my mother's grave. Nothing extravagant. A dark blue sedan. She would have approved. I sat on the grass beside the headstone as sunset moved through the cemetery. Bought a new car, I told her. Wind stirred the leaves. No, it's not ridiculous. A bird landed nearby. Yes, I know you'd have chosen the cheaper model. I smiled. For years after she died, visiting her grave felt like reopening a wound. That evening it felt different. Like returning to a room where someone had once loved me well. I told her about the foundation. About Halcyon. About Emily's children. About North Star. I did not tell her much about Claire. Not because I was angry. Because the story no longer belonged there. As I stood to leave, I noticed a small bunch of white lilies beside the headstone. Fresh. No card. I knew who had brought them. I touched one petal. Then I walked away. There was a time when I thought vindication would feel like applause. Like watching Claire discover my name on a billion-dollar company. Like seeing her understand that the man she had dismissed could have purchased every symbol of success she chased. But vindication was quieter than that. It was paying the funeral bill without bitterness. It was refusing to destroy someone when power finally made destruction easy. It was allowing consequences to happen without turning them into entertainment. It was learning that being underestimated is painful only while you still need the person underestimating you to validate your worth. Claire believed she left because I was not successful enough. For a while, I believed she had wounded me because she could not see who I really was. The truth was simpler. I had spent too many years waiting for another person's respect to confirm something my mother had taught me long Before North Star had revenue, offices, or investors. Worth does not become real when someone recognizes it. It was real before they arrived. It remains real after they leave. The last time I saw Claire was 3 years later. I was leaving a charity dinner when I noticed her across the hotel lobby. She looked different. Not poorer. Not defeated. Just softer. She was speaking to an elderly coat check attendant. When the woman dropped several claim tickets, Claire immediately crouched to help pick them up. No impatience. No embarrassment. No glance around to see who might be watching. For some reason, that moved me more than any apology she had ever given. Claire stood. Then she saw me. We looked at each other across the marble floor. She smiled. Small. Uncertain. I returned it. She did not walk over. Neither did I. There are people we forgive without inviting them back into our lives. There are chapters we honor by not reopening them. Outside, snow had begun to fall. My driver opened the car door, but I shook my head. I'll walk a little. I put my hands in my coat pockets and moved down the sidewalk. The city lights blurred through the snow. For once, I was not thinking about Claire. Not about Mark. Not about the acquisition. Not about the funeral bill. I was thinking about my mother standing inside that old warehouse 15 years earlier, staring at 4 battered desks and a dying coffee machine while I apologized because the office was embarrassing. She had looked around as though I had shown her a palace. Danny, she said, every big thing looks small before people understand what they're looking at. Back then, I thought she meant the company. I understand now. She meant people too. Claire never knew I owned North Star when she refused to help pay for my mother's funeral. But that was never the revelation that mattered. The real revelation came later. Money had not made me powerful. Ownership had not made me worthy. Her regret had not made me whole. I became free the moment I stopped needing the woman who underestimated me to finally understand my value. And somewhere between losing my mother, losing my marriage, and watching an entire ballroom stand when my name was announced, I learned the lesson she had tried to teach me all along. The best revenge is not making someone regret leaving you. It is building a life so peaceful that their regret no longer matters.